Okay, thank you, Chairs. Once again, I will be making this presentation, Communicating Biotechnology and Biosafety, and I also want to recognize some of our team members whom we've been working with in Africa in trying to enhance informed knowledge sharing and policies, including Professor Kenya there, the COMESA team, ABNE, and others. Now, I'll start with just one statement that has been made several times about how sad it is that scientists are spending so much time in the labs, but when their products get out there, the society rejects or the public rejects. And I think one of the major gaps or the missing link is that scientists many of them do not make that extra effort to make their work be seen to be relevant to societal needs. So today we are going to look at communications and just giving some ideas on how we can approach this difficult area where there has been a lot of debates and polarized views about the benefits and the risks of the technology. Now, this is the outline of my presentation. I'll very quickly look at why we want to communicate, the what of science communications. In this case, taking biotechnology and biosafety to be part of that science, then preparing for effective biosafety communications, and lastly, share with you some of the experiences we have had in ISA, working in partnership with others in the region and outside. Now, in terms of why communication is so important, precisely because we are finding the relationship between science and society, changing very rapidly with the access to information and communication technologies. It is very easy now to make an inquiry about anything that a scientist is doing anywhere in the world. And so this makes it more essential for us to be continuously engaging our public or our consumers. And then another very big challenge that is happening or has been happening with this technology is it has become very difficult to define who an expert is. So we have pseudo-experts or pseudo-scientists influencing the way policies are made in Africa, in most of our developing countries, and indeed even in developed countries. And so when the media, for example, communicates with a professor, it does not matter whether that professor is in political science or is in theology or in which area. The fact is, it is a professor, it is an expert, and you'll be quoting an expert's view or an expert's position about this technology. And this is precisely what has happened in Kenya today. A number of, some of our politicians may have consulted some pseudo-scientists or people who are really not in this area of expertise, but the fact that they are considered to be top scientists in the country, top, competent authorities in their areas, then they contribute to policy decision making. At the same time, we are finding society wanting to understand better and better the scientific process of inquiry. Unfortunately, they consult the same pseudosciences that we are talking about, which puts a question mark on availability of scientists to engage with the public. And all these scenarios have created what we call, a kind of an equilibrium, where on one side there is a group that thinks or that positions the technology as a monster that is going to finish the world, and on the other side, die-hard proponents who position the technology as the only solution to the challenges facing global community, and especially in the area of feeding the world. There's no answer to that question, and as we communicate, it is important that we moderate the messages, the kind of messages that we communicate with the public, because again, based on the interactions that the public have with different experts, depending on who you interact with, then you form perceptions. And yesterday we spent quite a bit of time with Alan there, just giving us about the many misconceptions that this technology has been faced with. Now, another major contributor to the misperceptions and misinformation about this technology is that the world, through information communication technologies, has become very, very networked. And a myth or a propaganda or a rumor will pass very, very fast. For example, if you just consider, let's say you have a small center, maybe 1 or 2 people are based in some place. They could be based in Cairo, they could be based in South Africa, or even in the US. Within a fraction of a minute, you can be able to pass that rumor throughout the world. And within 5 minutes, you ring Burkina Faso, and they'll be telling you about a rumor, or about a fact, so to say, that has been generated from some expert report or some expert peer-reviewed paper or some journal. So basically, in a world where misinformation passes so fast, then the scientists or the scientific community also need to devise a way of becoming very well networked and coordinated, so that you are also able to communicate evidence or the facts about a certain aspect of the technology very fast because of this communication. Unfortunately, again, scientists are not really very good in networking, and I would like to congratulate Nagla and her team for really bringing this meeting to be, where the scientific community from different parts of the world can start interacting and networking to be sharing a lot of this information. Now, the mass media, much as they are very important component of the communication stakeholders, I think in this area they have also developed some kind of, very creative, I would say, artistic illustrations on the products of biotechnology. For example, it's not unusual to find, this kind of representation in the newspapers. And you can imagine what that does to a farmer out there who sees this kind of illustration. We call it a fantasy or a fairy tale, or what, the imagination of the mind. Then we also know that most of the times media will report about the unusual. And I'm sure you are very much aware of this very common phrase that if a dog bites man, that is not news, because that is the usual thing. But, if a dog bites man, that's not news. But if a man bites a dog, that is unusual. And both sides of the coin, according to news gathering, may have the same weighting, but of course, the one that will sell news is the unusual situation when a man is biting the dog. At the same time, all these illustrations have created fear, mistrust, anxiety, and many times outrage about the technology. And in this situation, we say that all these issues are leading to what we would consider as communication difficulties, where emotions, we had this morning, feelings overrule facts. You have selective listening and hearing. Most of the times you listen or hear what you want to hear, mainly because of the way we have set our minds. If you set your minds that the technology has nothing to offer, you'll only hear that. Even when you provide the evidence, until the farmer grows the crop, it will remain as hearsay. Most of the times we tend to emphasize the negatives, mainly again because negative kind of closes in. We are more comfortable when you dismiss something than when you accept it, especially where there have been expressions of uncertainties or controversies. And so it is in these situations we say that we cannot not communicate. But now the challenge is, how do we enhance comprehension in a study or in an area as technical as genetic engineering and biosafety and all the other terms. And this emphasizes the important role of scientists becoming communicators or working with communicators to interest them in science so that they can be able to communicate about the science. So working together, the scientists and the communicators working together to have the science communicators. Now, many times, especially in this area of biotechnology, you may not even need to say a word. You only need to make a presentation or to have a structure. Now, this is a picture that was taken in one country that was conducting GM cotton trials. And when you look at the way the regulators have prescribed how a trial, a confined field trial should be, fenced. Now, in this case, although these guys here, you see here, their guards, they're having guns. Actually, they were not guarding the trial. It's because this trial was in prison land. But the fact that they're there and the community around see gunned guys around a confined field trials, that's already very big communication. It has a very big impact, because then people start wondering what it is that could be inside there that has to be guarded. So even the way we present the activities that we conduct communicate without saying a word. At the same time, now this is a picture. This guy here is actually our president, the president of Kenya, Honorable Mwai Kibaki. This picture was taken together with this guy here was then the director of the Kenya Agricultural Research Institute, which is the national institute spearheading research in biotechnology in Kenya. He was commissioning the first biosafety level 2 greenhouse in Kenya. And look at the dressing. So what does that kind of dressing tell you? When do you wear red? Yeah? Happy? During Valentine? During Valentine, when else? Danger. Red, especially in the scientific field, really signifies danger. And so these really are non-verbal communications, but they do communicate without our own knowledge. So let's now come to the what of science communications. Now, the mind of a scientist and that of a communicator are very, very different. From a scientist's perspective, when you communicate when you start with giving your hypothesis, describing your process, all the studies that you have done, all the experiments that you have made, and then you come to the results and the conclusions. But the communicator, or even so to say, those who are looking for news, ask the question. They ask, they think in the inverted way. That's why we have the inverted triangle there. They want to know the bottom line. Why are you doing all this research that you're doing? They're not interested in your hypothesis. They're not interested in how you conceived the idea. What is the bottom line? Why are you doing what you're doing? And then the next question that scientists don't really like is the so what question. Many times we interact with journalists and with communicators, and they tell you, okay, you seem to have some good ideas and you're doing some exciting research, but so what? What is it that brings or that relates your research to societal needs? So I think we need to really start rethinking on the way we communicate. When you're communicating in a journal paper, or for a journal paper, it is so different than when you're engaging and communicating with the public. The public doesn't want to know your A's and B's and C's, what you mixed and what you removed. They want to know the solution first, then you can describe all the other things that you did later, because that does not make news to them. It is the so what or the conclusion that matters most. Sorry? 2 minutes. How many? 2 minutes. Okay, thank you. I will try my best. Okay, so basically then when you look at the key components in biosafety communications, you want to have trusted communicators, you want to have credible content, and you want to have the best means, the appropriate means for the different stakeholders. So we talk about preparing the messenger, the message, and the means. So let's look very quickly at how we prepare for effective biosafety communications. Judy Chambers, our previous presenter, has already talked about the need and the importance of getting to understand your stakeholders. So it's important to do stakeholder analysis and net mapping so that you can get to understand who your champions are, who your patrons are, and who would influence what decision, especially from a political perspective. And this is a schematic presentation of the kind of stakeholder mapping that has been done, especially with the cotton stakeholders, and getting to understand the motives and the interests that stakeholders have and the power to influence the decision that you want to make out of your research. This is an example of how net mapping helps to establish the level of influence. Then packaging the message, very, very important. How do you package the message? One, we need to learn to simplify our language, technical language, and it is important for scientists to start developing a glossary of terms in local language so that you can be able to relate with the farmers, with the consumers, with the politicians. And this is an example or another way of packaging the messages using message mapping, which are really tools that you use to package information on a controversial subject in a way that the public or the stakeholders can comprehend easily. So it involves developing your 3 key messages, and each of the key message should be supported by 3 key facts. Beyond 3 facts, then you lose the public, because then they will not, it will be mental noise when you go beyond 3 messages. That's an example of a food and feed safety on modern biotechnology developed by a team of ISA associates, among many other issues that we have been able to develop for our policymakers. And then building capacity for science communications. And this involves the regulators, teachers who are teaching the young people, the scientists, again, in our universities and our research institutions, policymakers, and journalists. Then very, very importantly, many times we ask ourselves, what do we communicate and when do we communicate? The best approach is to use a phased approach where for each of the product development timelines or phases, you have different stakeholders for different messages and messengers, as well as different means of communication. So all the way from laboratory to the farmer release, adopting a phased approach to communications. Because if you don't communicate at whatever level you are, somebody else will miscommunicate. Very importantly, that we address myths and misconceptions consistently. I think many times scientists are guilty of leaving myths and rumors and propaganda in the public domain for a very long time without making a response. And here, communication should go beyond making a scientific statement. Yesterday, the statement that Alan ended with, that the scientific community need to fight back. How do you fight back? You cannot fight back with a scientific statement and leave it in the websites. You need to establish a rapid response team. You need to engage, because the other side will not just post a statement, they'll go out there and start engaging the politicians and the farmers and consumers. Just an example, there is this question that had been put in Kenya in our newspapers. How did 3 million bags of GM maize enter Kenya? It took a very long time for the rightful institutions to respond. And so we asked the question, who should respond? What message should it be to which stakeholder and how do you stakeholder. So you ensure that the right people get the right information at the right time through the right means. So very quickly, now 1 more minute, just to go through the ISA experiences in contributing to enhancing communications. One, we go through our communication business through establishment of biotech information centers, BICs, currently 24, and EBIC, the Egypt Biotech Information Center is one of these centers, ensuring knowledge sharing through a global knowledge center in the Philippines, and then the biotech information centers gather that knowledge. And then we have our flagship product, which is the global annual report on biotechnology, commercialized biotech crops, the yellow book. Then we have an electronic newsletter, weekly newsletter, that is currently having 1.3 million subscribers. It's called the Crop Biotech Updates. And the regions covered in Africa, North Africa for the Arab-speaking, West Africa for the French-speaking, and Eastern and Central Africa. In South Africa, we do this through partnerships. And we conduct a lot of media scientist linkages, and one of the lessons we have learned is building capacity and investing in good relations with credible journalists for increased and balanced reporting. Then the second approach we use is the scientific live shows, where we have learned that it is important to demystify biotechnology issues by exposing stakeholders to biotech processes and products. The third one is what we call seeing is believing study tours or traveling workshops. And this is investing in science, seeing is believing, to enhance acquisition of research, efforts, and confidence with local experts and products. Fourth is policymakers and scientists workshops. And here we have learned that politicians are very strong influencers, and so you need to build the confidence with the policymakers and the politicians. The fifth one is the through regular stakeholder engagement. We have a forum called the Open Forum on Agricultural Biotechnology, OFAB, really enhancing interpersonal communications. Then, of course, developing and simplifying, packaging a lot of knowledge products to enhance comprehension, including using cartoons for young people. And lastly, we invest a lot in strategic partnerships, and we are science communication service providers working with different teams, including those COMESA, ACTESA, ABNE, PBS, AATF, EBIC, and others. But we do have one of the communication challenges. There's renewed skepticism about the technology. Maybe most of you are aware about this French study that is trying to purport that GM crops are unsafe. We also have very few biotech champions within the scientific community. We need to develop that. We have very few products in Africa. In Africa, as a continent, we only have 2 countries, Burkina Faso and South Africa, of course, modestly in Egypt. And then, very, very importantly, technical terminologies that limits communication media. So to summarize, we need to adopt the best practice or planned communication model, being proactive than reactive. And we talk about the APP model, anticipating all the possible issues and questions on biosafety. Of course, you cannot exhaust that. Preparing the messenger, the message, and the means, and then practicing. So thank you very much, and we hope we can move together and run fast and get products with our farmers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.